God acts through us. It was a quiet, slightly chilly morning when Rohit reached the railway station. He was supposed to catch the early morning train to a nearby city for some work, but by the time he reached the platform, the train had already left. The next one wouldn't arrive for another few hours. He looked around, sighed, and thought, well, not much I can do now. His stomach grumbled a little. He hadn't had anything since last night and suddenly realized how hungry he was. So he decided to step out of the station and look for a place nearby to have breakfast. As he walked along the pavement outside the station, he was scanning the streets for a decent hotel. Something caught his eye. Two kids, probably no older than 8 or 9, were sitting quietly on the sidewalk. Their clothes were dirty and torn, and their faces looked tired and hungry. Rohit slowed down as he passed them. There was something about their eyes. They didn't say a word, but their faces told a story, one of struggle, discomfort, and most of all, hunger. He stopped. Fumbling into his pocket, he pulled out a 10-rupee note. He walked back and gently handed it to them. "Here, get something to eat," he said softly. The kids looked at him, then at the note in their hands. Before they could say anything, Rohit nodded and continued walking toward the hotel down the road. But just a few steps later, something tugged at him from the inside. "What am I doing?" he thought. 10 rupees? What can they even buy with 10 rupees? I can't even get a proper cup of tea for that. He felt a wave of guilt wash over him. I saw how hungry they looked, and all I gave them was a note not even worth a proper snack. He paused, turned around, and walked back to where the kids were still sitting and staring at the note in their hands like it was something rare. "Hey," Rohit said, squatting down in front of them. "Would you like to come with me to eat something at the hotel?" The two kids looked at each other, hesitant, unsure, and a little scared. It was clear they didn't know how to react. But hunger is a powerful thing, and after a few seconds, they nodded. So, the three of them started walking to the hotel together. 2 ragged little boys and a well-dressed man with a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. As they reached the entrance, a man who looked like the hotel owner stopped them. His face turned sour the moment he saw the kids. "Hey, you can't bring them in here. They'll make the place dirty. Send them away," the hotelier barked, waving his hand as if trying to swat flies. Rohit's face tightened. "They're with me," he said firmly, "and I'm paying for their food, so there's no reason to stop them." The hotelier stared at him, caught off guard. A few seconds passed. Then, perhaps realizing how cold and ugly his words had sounded, he looked down, embarrassed. "All right, I'm sorry," the man mumbled and stepped aside. They walked in. The hotel wasn't too fancy, but it was clean and had that warm smell of freshly cooked food. Rohit found a table near the window, and they all sat down. The kids sat awkwardly on the edge of their chairs, unsure of what to do. Their hands stayed in their laps, and they avoided looking at anyone. "What would you like to eat?" Rohit asked gently. The kids didn't reply. Maybe they didn't know what was on the menu. Or maybe they were just not used to being asked what they wanted. Rohit smiled and called the waiter. "Just bring us 2 plates of whatever is fresh," he said. When the food arrived, hot, simple, and smelling delicious, something changed. The moment the plates were set in front of the kids, their eyes lit up. They looked at the food, then at each other, And finally, they smiled. It wasn't a forced smile. It was the kind of smile that came straight from the heart. A smile that said more than words ever could. They picked up their spoons and began eating, first cautiously, then faster, and then as if they couldn't get enough. Rohit sat there watching them. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. Just seeing those two boys eat like that, with joy written across their faces, was enough. After they finished, Rohit ordered a small sweet for them. They were shy at first, but finished every bite. He paid the bill, and as they left the hotel, he reached into his wallet again. "Here," he said, handing them a few more notes. "Use this to get some new clothes, all right?" The kids took the money, their eyes wide, not quite believing it. One of them whispered a thank you. The other one just nodded, still holding the sweets in his hand. Rohit smiled and waved as he turned to walk back toward the station. Days passed. Rohit got back to his daily routine. Office, travel, meetings, calls. But for some reason, those two kids stayed in his mind. Every now and then, he'd find himself thinking about them. He'd wonder if they were okay, if they got new clothes, if someone else had been kind to them after that day. And sometimes, he'd just feel sad, not for what he had done, but for the reality they were living. One evening, after a long week, he visited a nearby temple. It was quiet, peaceful, and offered a calm he didn't get elsewhere. As he stood in front of the idol with folded hands, he thought of those boys again. And then, without realizing it, he whispered under his breath, "God, where are you? How can you sit silently when children like them suffer? They were so hungry, so helpless. Why don't you do something?" His question hung in the silence for a few seconds. And then, something clicked in his mind. Wait, who do you think had been taking care of them all this time? You think they survived all these years just like that? The thought came like a whisper, not from the temple walls, not from the sky, but from somewhere deep within him. And what about that day? Do you really think it was all your idea to go back and help them? Rohit blinked. What if that was also God's work? What if God sent you that day? He stood there and stunned by the simplicity of the thought. He had never thought of it that way. All along, he thought he was helping them out of his own kindness. But maybe, just maybe, he had been chosen to help them that day. Maybe God didn't show up in the way people expected, not as a miracle, not as magic, but as someone like him, doing what needed to be done. He smiled faintly. Maybe that's how it works, he thought. Maybe when we help someone, we're just playing our small role in a much bigger plan, a divine plan. He didn't have all the answers, but suddenly his heart felt a little lighter. The moral of the story is that in every small act of help, you might just be fulfilling God's biggest plan.